So I am Stella. I am the Partnerships Director here at Forward Action. We also have Alicia with us today. Excuse me. Alicia is our Partnerships Officer. She's behind the scenes at making sure that everything works all right, responding to your comments, making sure we have all your questions at hand at the end to answer. So for those of you, many of you, I recognize you, many of you know who we are, but for those of you who don't, we are a digital mobilization agency. We work with progressive causes to really help them scale their impact. And the way we do this is by using digital channels and tactics and different tools to find and engage lots and lots of people online who share your values. We work with organizations of different sizes, different teams, campaigns teams, fundraising teams. We do lots of strategy work, but basically everything that we do is data-led, it's insight-led, which is where today's topic comes in. We've been using Google Analytics like for ages. I know many of you have as well. It's just really invaluable in helping us understand how our campaigns perform, how to optimize, where to invest our budget. And you're here, so you all know that Google recently switched to GA4, and we've had lots of questions actually. So we've been in meetings with partners, and people have been emailing us, asking us questions about, how to make the most of it, how different kind of bits of the platform work. So this is why we are having this session today. Before I hand over to Dylan and introducing him, I'm just going to do a few housekeeping bits. So you should be able to enable closed captures if you need them. So please do that. If you have any questions, just ask them in the Q&A box. We will be collecting them and answering them at the end, but also feel free to use the chat if there's anything you need. We will be sending after this session a recording because there's people who haven't been able to make it today, but also for you to refer back to, of course, if you need to. And I think that's it. So just to briefly introduce Dylan. So Dylan is our lead developer here at Forward Action. Basically, Dylan is the person who brings all of our creative solutions to life, Dylan and the team. He's really heavily involved in any kind of solutions that we build that integrates with systems and delivers our partners' objectives. And he's been working with Forward Action for maybe about a year. Is that right, Dylan? Yep.
Yeah, about that.
Excellent. And before that, Dylan was at the Labour Party, and he's worked across different campaigns and activism groups. So you're in really good hands. He's been doing some work with some of our partners already. Well, he's been quite busy over the last few weeks with the GA4 transition, and I know there is lots you want to share today. So I'll be turning my camera off, and I will hand over to you, Dylan.
Great, thank you so much for that, Stella. As Stella said, I think the whole transition to GA4 has been quite a lot and has been quite confusing for a lot of people. So hopefully this will shed some light, because I think there's a lot of partners reached out to us and said that it's been a bit, despite Google, giving a lot of warning, the guidance hasn't been great. And also being forced to, switch over to a new version of a platform without, actually wanting to a lot of the time isn't the best user experience. So we've been trying to make sure that our partners are comfortable and know what the platform is like. And hopefully this presentation will give you a bit of an insight into the platform, but also give you a bit more familiarity with it as well. And yes, thank you for joining us this morning. I hope it's you're ready to dive into Spanalytics, and it's a great way to start a Thursday morning. Quickly going to go through what we're going to cover today. Just really going to go over what GA4 is, what's new about it, a few insights into what we've done in Forward Action. I'll be going through our own analytics setup and showing you the platform and what we've done on it. To do that, to hopefully makes it a bit easier, so it's not just an abstract presentation, and that you can also see the platform in action. And then just a few recommendations of what we would say you should be doing, and we'll finish off with the Q&A. So to start, I want to start us off with a poll. This wouldn't be a Zoom webinar without a poll. So the poll option should appear now. And the question is just, how confident do you feel in your knowledge of GA4 at the moment?
Okay, I am seeing the results coming in. Excellent. Thank you everyone for answering. So the majority of people, over 80%, say they feel not so confident. We have about 18% who say somewhere in the middle, and we have 1% who's very confident. That is really, really great. Maybe you can help us with answering some of the questions.
Great, cool, thank you for that. It's quite actually reassuring to hear that a lot of people are not so confident, because it means that this presentation is hopefully going to be quite useful to you. And please receive any questions you have in the chat, because I'm going to try and be as comprehensive as I can, but it's I think a 30-minute presentation definitely is not going to be able to cover all of it. So we'd be really keen to hear as well what other kind of things you'd like to know about it. Yeah, we can hopefully follow that up after this presentation as well. So to get started is just what is Google Analytics for? So it's just the latest version of Google Analytics. Google Analytics has been around for quite a long time now. The last iteration was released over 10 years ago now, which was Universal Analytics, something that I think a lot of people have gotten quite used to. I think even though it's been around for that long, though, my experience has been that Universal Analytics was similarly an extremely confusing tool, and that most people either didn't understand or didn't know how to use it in the best way. So I think this latest release of Google Analytics 4 is actually a very good opportunity as well to really dig into what analytics has to offer. A bit of background on it. So Google recognized that the internet has changed a lot since the last release of analytics. In that time, we've seen, of course, like so many new privacy laws come in, like GDPR, and also changes to the way that people are browsing sites and using the internet in general. So Google Analytics 4 focuses a lot more on the user's journey and events that are triggered throughout it. It's now gone to a fully event-based tracking platform, whereas before it was looking at sessions and page views and unique views, which are things you might have seen in Universal Analytics. Now it's all about events. So there's page view events, there's scrolling events. A lot of these are automatically tracked now, as long as you enable some enhanced settings. So now clicks, scrolls, transactions, those are all automatically detected by Google and are saved as events in the platform. There's also a new customizable exploration view for reporting. This kind of in-depth kind of analysis of the reports used to only be available for Analytics 360 customers, which is like a paid-for service. And now it's available as standard across the platform. And I think it's probably one of the more exciting parts of the platform, because it really makes it as easy as possible to go in and just get the information that you need. And you can set up your own reports and explorations to kind of dig into what the data is and get as much insights as possible out of it. And of course, there is a very heavy focus on user privacy, as this was one of the main reasons that Google wanted to make the switch and wanted to create this platform. So I want to talk a small bit more on GA4 and privacy. This is not going to cover absolutely everything, but just like a few things that I think is useful to recognize is like the actual controls that you now have over the privacy of your users. Some of the things Google does automatically, like it's IP anonymization by default. So it doesn't collect IPs by default. This can be changed and users can opt in and set their own cookie preferences as well. There is also user data storage settings. So depending on your organization's needs, you can now choose between either 2 months or 14 months to hold user data storage. This isn't any really extremely user identifiable data, because personally identifiable information is still prohibited in Google Analytics. So that's things like email address, telephone number, that kind of thing. Like it's part of the terms of service that you're not to store that information. But to remove anything that could be possibly linked to a user, it's much easier now to remove that automatically, either by setting the limits. And this also doesn't affect then the general events and page metrics. So you can still see the reporting back. It's not that it deletes all data every 2 months or anything like that. It's just anything that's could be associated with a user. And another new kind of feature that has to do with privacy as well is the data modeling. So this is a really interesting feature and something I'll be talking about later on the line down the presentation. And it's how Google is basically filling in the gaps in analytics because of privacy controls. So because people are much more focused on privacy and users want that privacy, you're going to see a lot less people like opting into the cookies as you go forward. And Google recognized that. And so this data modeling that they've created basically fills those gaps in so that it can kind of predict what users' behavior would be based on other users' behavior or based on browsers' behavior. And so that's like a thing that makes it that it's the reason that GA4 is able to have such stricter privacy settings so that they can actually still, without losing the data that you're also collecting. And then finally, it's also using first-party cookies. Given a bit of an explanation on this, because I think sometimes people talk about cookies and there's like a lot of unknowns around it. So instead of third-party cookies, which is when the ones that you'd be more used to historically seeing of as cookies set on a page, and then it follows you throughout, your use of the internet, and it collects information. And this is how, you can build up those user profiles of like, oh, this person visited this site and then went to this shop and then, bought this product, and then you get advertising based on those. So this is now, Google is now using first-party cookies, which is set on the device of the user in a similar way, but it only tracks any kind of data and analytics on the site that the cookie was actually set on. So this is like a much more private form of viewing, and it's done by assigning a device ID to the user, which can be used to know, the same things we see in analytics before, like if a user is new or existing, if they've interacted with the site before, if they visited the site 2 weeks ago and they've only just made a purchase, so those get those kind of insights, and that's how Google can keep track of this. And similar to the data modeling that I mentioned before, GA4 uses machine learning to fill in the gaps in the data. So because there is less of a knowledge of what other users are doing, it uses the machine learning, which I'm going to be talking about as well in relation to data modeling, to fill in those gaps and to make sure that we're not losing any of that kind of valuable insights into users just because they've decided that they don't want to have any like cookies, for example, on their browsers. So that's just to make a bit of a background into why GA4 exists in the first place. And now I'm going to go into some of the features, talk you through the platform, and hopefully can get you a bit more familiar with what we're talking about. So the structure of GA4 accounts, I think, can sometimes people can sometimes not sure how the best way to structure it is. So I just wanted to quickly just talk to that. So GA4 slightly changed the way that Universal Analytics was set up. So GA4, there is a property which you'd be recognized from, when you're adding the property to a site. So previously you'd have that ID where it's like UA and then a hyphen and loads of letters and numbers, and you'd add that to your site and it would know which Google property to send analytics events to. It's a similar thing now, but the property is a G with a hyphen and a bunch of letters and numbers. The difference is though that in GA4 the property is the main thing, and whereas before in Universal Analytics you could have set up separate views in the same property, so you could filter things like say by location if you had different kind of regions, or you could like filter by the domain or the URL so that you make sure that any website has different properties associated with it. So that's slightly changed now, and GA4 uses not views, but what Google recommends is to create reports specific to those kind of filters that you want to get insights on. Most of the recommendations from Google about the property setup is actually geared towards bigger organizations that maybe are international or have multiple different products, and actually smaller organizations. And I think the ones that we work with a lot are fine just to use one property and for their whole setup, because a lot of the time, even if it's across multiple websites, say there's a campaign website and a main website, it's okay for these to be under the same one because say the organizational goal is the same under both of them. You can of course separate them out and create different properties based on your own needs, but it's not fully necessary because there are a lot of controls now in terms of reporting, especially to be able to differentiate where these events are coming from. And you can also control the different level of access that users have. So say if you have different types of stakeholders, like the fundraising team wanting to just look at e-commerce, but then a campaigns team that just want to look at conversions and insights into how a petition, for example, will be doing. So you can change the access controls to make it easier to maintain the one property and just get people can just see what they need to. A couple of other things to mention is there's cross-domain metrics can be set up. This has existed in Universal Analytics as well, and it just means that even if you have the one property and then you have it on multiple domains, like, you have it on your main website or just your campaigns page, it will still be able to track the user, and it'll know it's the same user across those sites, as long as you have the same property ID on those sites. And a couple other things to mention was, even though they actually aren't part of the general JPro platform, these are paid for properties, is a roll-up property and a sub property. A roll-up property is mostly for like bigger businesses that have, say, a different property for each region that they operate in. And a roll-up property is just a summary, really. It doesn't collect any data itself, but it just aggregates all the data from the other properties, so you can see like an overview of the performance, say, from across different regions. This would be especially useful for stakeholders, say, who are, like on the board level, who just want kind of a summary view. And sub properties are similar to filter views in Universal Analytics. So you see data sets based on geolocation or different filters, but these is also a paid for service. So Google does recommend that instead of sub properties, you can just use reports and filters and access controls. So just look at some of the features that we've been finding really useful at Forward Action, and ones that we've been trying to, we see as the kind of most useful way to start off and make sure that you're getting at least the most out of the basics of Google Analytics, is conversion events. So conversion events, as I mentioned, that Google has moved to a fully event-based analytics, and conversion events can be seen as what goals used to be in Universal Analytics, if people are familiar with that. Goals are just things that they wanted someone to be, okay, they come on the site, the goal is that they sign up for this webinar, for example. And now that's moved to conversion events. So we'd say that if on this a webinar sign up page, someone clicks the button to sign, the conversion would be that they've signed it, and an event will be fired to Google and marked as a conversion. As it's the conversion events now are much more easier to set up than goals used to be. So I'm going to quickly just do a quick overview of like how to do that. So this is GA4. Hopefully people are somewhat familiar with the platform. I'm not going to go through all of it, but just to quickly run through events and conversions. You can see here, this is the main kind of reports homepage, which you might be familiar with. It has general overview of different kind of widgets. Right now, what I'm going to focus on, though, is under engagement, and you can see events and conversions. They're very much similar things. Events is just a list of every single event that is coming through from your pages. You can see here, page view events are generally going to be the highest ones, because it's anytime someone lands on your page, you see this. But you can see other times custom events that are coming through as well. If I go to conversions, which is right below it, you can see here that these are some much more filtered view of the events that you're coming through. And there's just 3. So it's petition signed, shares to Facebook, and opt-in subscribed. These are the ones that we have specifically said that we want to be conversion events. And it basically just gives you a filtered view of the events, of all the events on the page, just because so that you can look at, okay, how are people converting on the site? Maybe we have different ways we want to track this, if it's a petition sign up or donation, for example, but is it an easy view to go on here? It's very simple to set these up. You can just go into the admin section, which looks still very similar to what it did to before. And you can see, again, there's 2 sections here, events and conversions. And all you need to do is toggle these on and off. So I could, for example, toggle donate yes, for example, on. If I go to conversions, you can see then this is the list ones we had here. So donate yes is now in there. Opt-ins, petition, share ones we made ourselves. Purchase is a default one that Google adds. We don't have any purchases on this site, so there's nothing showing for it. And you can also create your own events here. So you can just write in a completely custom event name if you wanted to. All you have to do is make sure that it is actually firing on your site and that it's pulling in the information. So you can see that's a very simple way of doing it. Goals used to be a bit more difficult to set up, but the conversion events, as it's an event-based platform, is now the kind of main way to do this. Following into this is expiration reports in GA4. I think this is one of the best features of it, and something that makes it much more useful than the Universal Analytics before, because there was definitely issues before with getting information out of Universal Analytics and presenting in a way that was easy to digest. Before I got into that, I will talk to you about our platform Blueprint, which is If you don't know, and hopefully a lot of people have used Blueprint, it's our platform that we've developed ourselves to build hand raisers and campaigns for our partners. And we have, during the GA4 transition, we decided to make sure that all the events are standard across all the platforms, and that the names are as specific as possible so we know what the events are coming from. This is just an overview. It might seem there's a lot here, but I just wanted to give you an overview of how these events are looking so that when we look into the reports, it makes it a bit more clear. For anyone who doesn't know Blueprint, it's based on different slides. So there's a form slide, a standard on every page, and it fires off event names like petition signed, which we just saw when I was looking at the conversion events, opt-in, subscribed, unsubscribed, and then a lot of other events that are specific to each part of the user journey. So coming from this is what we've set up on our Blueprint pages, and we've then set up a custom report. So the exploration reports can be seen in the Explore tab here. And you can see there's like a few templates that Google has here that you can easily just click on and it will spin up using your own data based on what you need it for. We've, for the events reporting, you can see here, just gone for a very standard table layout. So you can see here, there's a lot on this page, but what you basically see is like, this is where the data is. There's variables here are the kind of information that you want on the report, and tab setting is just how it's viewed. There's various kind of filters and everything that you can add to this as well. And also what's quite good as well is that there's different tabs, so you can filter the data just here without needing to ever like click and make the filter every time you use the site. You can also, we have it set up so that each of our pages on our demo site is in different columns, so we can very easily compare the different events that are happening across the different pages and campaigns. And of course, there's the total event count as well. So you can see here all the various different ones. We can see all our Blueprint platforms, what are the most popular events that are firing. The tabs are useful for filtering, so we can say, I only want to look at opt-in events. So it just limits to opt-in, subscribed, unsubscribed. And you can then see again, okay, these pages, people are opting in a lot on this page. And that gives us good insight into the way people are using the site. A useful thing as well on this is you can opt in, you can create different filters. So for example, I want to look at opt-in events, but by campaign. So Google still uses UTM parameters, so UTM campaign, UTM source, and it pulls those in by default. And so in these exploration views, you can add the session campaign here. So you can see, okay, opt-in subscribed coming from direct, organic. You can see here one of the names of the campaigns itself. And this is like a very easy thing to add. You can just add in here into the rows, which represent these. You can add in the event name, which is this, and the session campaign. And this comes from just the classic dimensions, which are still very similar to what you would have seen in Universal Analytics. So yeah, that was just an overview of the exploration view. There's also, just to give an insight, it's just not just tables. You can also do, like, for example, path exploration, which is a very useful one. And something like this exists in Universal Analytics, where it basically just shows you, okay, what events happened in what order for each user. And I've kind of put out just a standard path here, which is, someone lands on the page, a page view events fires, they scroll, they start filling out the form, the petition gets signed, and then they opt in yes or no. And this gives good insight into how users are using the page. I think especially interesting here is if someone has started the form, 26 out of 35 filled in the form, which is quite a good conversion rate. But say if you came on and you saw that anyone who starts the form, maybe 5 people actually ended up signing it, you can get a good insight there that maybe something needs to change on the form, and you need to, potentially there's something not going right there and you need to make some optimizations. So now I'm going to talk a bit about data modeling with machine learning. So this sounds like quite a big topic, and it is, but I'm going to keep it quite light today and just briefly mention how Google is using machine learning. Machine learning is an application of artificial intelligence, which has been around for years. And it's really just that, which I think people are quite used to hearing, is that the machine is loaded with is inputted with loads of data from different sources, and then it's able to learn from this and create data models based on these insights. So Google uses multiple different inputs for its machine learning. For example, it uses, if say, for example, you're on a browser that is extremely heavy on privacy, and doesn't track any user behavior and doesn't let you say use analytics, for example, Google will use other browsers as an example to kind of model those analytics to make sure that you can still kind of track what users are doing, or at least kind of predict what they would be doing. The reason it needs to rely on it, as I said before, is mainly comes down to privacy. But Google built GA4 with privacy in mind, and especially to be durable and future-proof. So it should work without cookies, with cookies or without. It also takes into mind that because of privacy laws, you're never going to be able to track every single user, and it's actually just going to get more difficult as time goes on. People are much more conscious of privacy now, and in general, it's quite, I think, a good thing on the internet. People are aware of what their data is doing and where it's going. But this just means that, you know, organizations, especially analytics ones, need to adapt to this. And Google is kind of saying here, okay, yes, we recognize that privacy is an issue and is like a concern for people. So they want to make it as easy as possible for users to opt out, but also for organizations to still be able to collect valuable data and gain insights and know what the conversions are and hit their KPIs. So this is like, the machine learning is a way of doing that. So there are a few different ways that Google applies machine learning. I'll talk briefly about conversion modeling, which is, as we were talking about conversions earlier, conversion modeling is basically, as I said, say if someone has privacy settings on their browser that doesn't allow you to track them, it learns how other users behave on the site based on, you know, their browser settings, but also based on how they've interacted with the site before. Say if they, you know, on that path exploration that I just showed you, if someone has gone through this, landed, scrolled, started the form, signed the petition, you know, they use machine learning to say, okay, well, if someone hasn't turned cookies on, we can still figure out a rough idea of how many people will be doing this, even if we don't get the complete attributed event. And actually a lot of when you're looking at, say, reports, for example, if I go back into the report section and into conversions, when you have conversion modeling and machine learning enabled, the conversions number here can actually be made up of both attributed events, so ones that come from, we know, real users, and modeled events, so Google's kind of prediction of like how other users will be using it, which is quite an interesting thing, because, you know, I think Google is basically saying that, you know, you need to rely on the fact that the machine learning is reliable, and that these numbers can give you a better insight of how many people are using it and how many have been tracked, but also what it expects other users to have done based on this machine learning. So that was a very quick introduction to machine learning, but hopefully quite useful to know how Google is actually like managing these new privacy laws. So those are the main features I wanted to talk about, and I just wanted to kind of finish up with some recommendations about what you should be doing now, just based on what we just talked about, really. Firstly, I think just making sure that you're aware of like what the privacy settings are, you taking your users' cookie and privacy settings into account, but, you know, being able to rely on Google Analytics, that it will still be capturing valuable data, and that you will still be able to make strategic and organizational decisions based on this data, even if it mightn't be capturing absolutely every single event that someone is making on the page. So that is definitely something to just consider, that, you know, it's almost becoming more reliable now to use this analytics platform, even if it's not capturing every single user's events. Secondly is would recommend to set up conversion events based on your KPIs. So most people will have organizational or, you know, team-based KPIs. I think it's good to be able to set up conversion events based on these, just so that it's clear when you go into analytics what these events are, what your conversions are that matter to you, and you can easily then set up reports to track these as well. And if you're setting up these events, just making sure that you have these events being captured on your site and that they're coming through properly. And then finally is to set up custom exploration reports. So as I just went through, those reports that we have for Blueprint, for example, and the different tabs and everything, it makes it a lot easier for us when we're reporting. We work with multiple different partners at any one time. So we are looking at setting up these kind of like that templated Blueprint, especially reports, so that when we are working with a partner, we can go into the analytics, set up a Blueprint template report, so that when we are reporting on it, we don't have to go into the reports and explore and find the page and then find the details from that, and then do the same thing for every single page we have a campaign on. We can just set up an exploration report and have this information available right away when we go in, so we're not wasting our time kind of trying to dig it in, which a lot of universal analytics, I think people found that quite a frustrating thing, that you couldn't really get the information you wanted right away. So we definitely recommend setting those up. And as we have been exploring it ourselves, we are also very happy to help anyone who needs support with those kind of reports as well. So I'm going to finish it there with another poll, and this one would like to know, what GA4 feature would you like to learn more about? So mainly it's going to be the ones that we talked about already, and if you have any other suggestions, please just put it in the chat, because we'd love to hear kind of what people are interested in learning about.
Interesting. So people are still voting, but I can see reporting tools are quite high. So yeah, so most people say reporting tools are closely followed by conversion events. And then we have data modeling and cookies privacy are kind of like a lower rate. For those of you who are interested in conversion events, I believe we have a blog up we put up recently on conversion events. Is that right?
Yeah, the blog we put up was talking through the events that we put on Blueprint. So yes, they do mention conversion events, and we'll be also putting up more on a blog post about this talk on conversion events after this as well.
That's great. Lovely, thank you so much. So questions are coming through. I think everyone was just really focused whilst you were presenting, Dylan, but we've had a few questions in already. So thank you, everyone. Keep posting your questions in the Q&A box, and we have plenty of time to go through all of them. So let's start with the first one. So Lauren wanted to know how we can build custom reports to identify events taken by those with a given UTM campaign code. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So if I go back into the events reporting expression that I showed you earlier, and as I was saying here with these events, this tab, for example, these events are split up by session campaign, and you can add in any dimensions here that you'd want to. So I could you know, add in like event category, for example, which I mentioned before is set up. So like you can see here, all the event category is always going to be Blueprint on our Blueprint pages, and this is a Blueprint dedicated GA4 page. The event category probably not the most useful thing to put in because it's all going to be the same. But when you're doing your reports, like with these variables that you set here in the dimensions, which are still very similar to what was in Universal Analytics, they can give you basically complete control over what the reports and the data that you're seeing. And I think especially this, I would very much, recommend lean into using these tabs, because you can create, for example, here we have, the opt-in events just by these, and then you can create as well the opt-in events by campaign to really kind of dig deep into where those, with different campaigns and what ones are performing better than others, for example. So yeah, it's using these dimensions, and then you can add them into these rows section here. I think this exploration view it can do a lot, but there's also like a lot to it when you first look at it, and there might be a lot of different sections and different bits and pieces that you're like, I just don't understand what this is, and it took us a while to wrap our heads around it as well. So as I said, we're very much happy to talk more about like those reporting setups and how best to use them for what your specific KPIs are.
Is about privacy. So this is from Refuge, and they're saying that at Refuge, they're concerned about survivors being shown Refuge-related content elsewhere online. Is there anything with this enhanced privacy that would help with this?
That is a good question, and actually not probably something I'm fully able to answer, to be honest. I think if it's content to do with if it's your own advertising, is it, or is it any kind of content to do with domestic abuse? That is the question. Yeah, it's more specific on that.
Let's see if Anna replies. but yeah, I'm not sure. We can wait a minute or so and see and come back to it if Anna you want to post, but obviously we work with you at Refuge, so we can always get back to you on that separately if you like. But yes, it is a really good question, and I know that is a concern for you when women who access the website go to different sites, just are online and suddenly content pops up. Obviously you want to avoid that. Okay, let's see if we can come back to that. Somebody asked us, what are the advantages of GA4 over Plausible or Umami and other options?
Over what was the other option, sorry, that you mentioned?
Plausible and Umami.
I think there's a lot to do with, is GA4 the right property for what you need it for specifically? I think that's kind of the question to ask. I think obviously Google Analytics has dominated the scene in analytics for quite a while now, and you can really see them making a move here with trying to, say that because a lot of other platforms recognize that Universal Analytics especially wasn't very privacy focused. There was as a platform, it just didn't really take that into account as much. And so you saw a lot of platforms popping up that were very privacy heavy. And so I think because of that now, and especially because of the reporting and the fact that it's just used very widely, is a lot of the benefits of analytics. I do think though that, it really depends on your own kind of organizational user case as well. There's, I would say that for me, it would be because Google now has these privacy settings in mind and that they are used across all of the other applications as well. Like if you're using Google Ads, or if you're using like Tag Manager and Analytics all in tandem with each other, those consent settings, for example, can be set across everything. So because a lot of Google products are already in use and they already all operate quite well with each other, it does make the case for analytics quite strong, I feel, in that way that, obviously Google have created quite, have built the internet in a lot of ways, and it's still quite dominant in that space. So it does sometimes feel easier just to use those platforms because of the wide availability and the way that they can all interconnect with each other. So I think that this move with the privacy especially makes a big difference, and the fact that you have now these expiration views. Google seems to be kind of listening to, and looking at the competitors and what they've been doing over the years and really responding to that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. We heard back from Anna at Refuge, and she's saying that generally they don't want survivors to be shown anything really. So for example, can they exclude Get Help related pages? They exclude them from Google Ads. But she does say it's quite hard to explain, so we can pick it up separately as well.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think, in general, I think with the move to first-party cookies, like I said, it will be less likely that your users going to be tracked across the web. Obviously, this doesn't stop other sites and other types of cookies being set. This is just related to analytics itself. But yeah, it's actually a very interesting question. Definitely would like to follow up on that afterwards to properly discuss how that would look.
Great. Lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll do that. We've had a couple of questions about Looker Studio. Somebody's asking, they would just be interested to know more about using Looker Studio to report from GA4. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely as I've been looking more into GA4, I feel like there's a lot now that it can do, and it almost can feel like, oh, is Looker Studio as useful anymore? Because that used to be the real data visualization tool that Google had. And I think because Universal Analytics didn't have those capabilities, it made a lot of sense. I still think there's a lot of use in it, especially when you're creating different dashboards and you want especially a very easy shareable view that you want to send on to say other external stakeholders, and they don't need to be looking into your analytics account. It's still a very good external facing tool that you can use. And its data visualization, I think, is still better than the exploration views. The exploration views, I think, are definitely more for the people who are doing the reporting. I know from our point of view, and when our project teams are working on campaigns, the reporting can take such a long time, going from different platforms, say from Facebook to Twitter, and looking at the different the different data from those different platforms. So making it as easy as possible in those platforms and in GA4 to be able to report on those things, I think makes a big difference. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily going to replace the Looker Studio and data visualization in general. It's much more kind of still an internal kind of facing tool. And it can be set up to make it as easy as possible for people on your reporting teams to do their job.
Great. That's great. I mean, the other question we had about Looker Studios, I think you've basically answered it already, but that person is asking whether we've switched completely, which you kind of talked about, and they said that they've always liked Looker Studio as a dashboard to share, but it seems like it has way less options to put in the dashboard than through explorations.
Yeah, I think, the explorations, you can really dig into like all the information, but I think, like I said, with the benefit of Looker Studio is that a lot of people just aren't, especially like say external stakeholders or board members, really just wanted the top line kind of things. So it's still useful in that way to like visually display the data and make it as accessible to people like who aren't on the teams as possible. But yes, with the exploration view, really you can just like dig into data as much as you want to, which I think is a really beneficial point of it.
Great, thanks. We had a couple more questions. Somebody just wondered what the most useful journeys to track are. So they say just a basic overview of reporting tools and conversion events. What are the most useful journeys to track?
Honestly, that is probably a thing that we would have to speak to people on an individual level about. Like, it's so different. It really depends on your what your organizational goals are and your KPIs and just what kind of things you're really interested in digging into. Even depends on a campaign basis. We work with so many different partners and they run different campaigns and the goals and the KPIs are different on those different campaigns. So, what we're looking into there and the conversion events are going to change. So I would definitely say that if you do have any questions like that, specific ones about like how to set up your specific kind of reporting, we would be more than happy to talk to you about that. I think we have a kind of a template set of questions that we would send you regarding like the different sites that you'd be using, what you're hoping to achieve from it, and then we would be able to help talk you through what that would look like.
Exactly right. And then because this question was posted anonymously, we won't be able to contact you. So if you do want to chat to us about us, just send us an email at hello@forwardaction.uk. And that does prompt me actually to ask you, we have one more question, but can you tell people a little bit about what it is that we can help them with here at Forward Action?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like based on what I was talked about is, the kind of the really specific things that like campaigns in general need. I think like people have, from that poll that we just did as well, like the conversion events and reporting, I think those are basically top of people's list. So these are things that we're already helping some partners with, and especially throughout the GA4 transition that happened last month, a few people did get back in touch with us and asked to help help configure GA4 as well. So this would be things like making sure that all the enhancements are turned on. Say if you wanted the machine learning and data modeling, making sure that's part of it, connecting to different accounts, and making, say for Google Ads, for example, and making sure that data is coming in. And what we can also do, which is a project we're doing at the moment, is looking at what your goals and KPIs are and saying, okay, well, based on these are the conversion events that you should add to your page. We can help with implementing that. And then we can also make sure that they are coming into analytics and we can set up the reports to reflect that. I think setting up customer reporting especially is something that we're really keen to help people with, because I think it would be such a time saver for so many different organizations. So that's definitely one we would like to be able to focus on. And then just general training, I think, would be one, like just, talking people through the platform, how to set up their own reports, how to do kind of various bits and pieces. Obviously, we're kind of, still learning a lot of new features as well. And I think it'd be really great to be able to, work with people and ask, when they've asked us questions about what they need from it, that is when we can kind of be like, oh, okay, yeah, we can use this feature in this way. And actually that will help us with like other partners as well. So yeah, various things. And hopefully it's mostly about just familiarizing our partners with the platform so they can kind of enable them to use it themselves.
Yeah, I think that's right. And like I said earlier, just drop us an email if you have any questions at all. We can have an initial chat and see if we can help you. Somebody asked about segmentation. Can you still segment your users on GA4 like you can in events in GA360?
Is that just in terms of like reporting itself or the audiences? Is that, I'm guessing, is that the question? Because yes, you can. It's not something I had mentioned in this, but I think, is it in? This is my demographics. It isn't there. It's not something I prepared for the meeting, so I can't remember exactly where it is. But you can create you can segment users, and you can create audiences based on that. And there's actually, as part of the transition from Universal Analytics, is one of the things which Google enabled is to be able to pull it in your audiences from Universal Analytics, which I believe is still available. There's still there's like a setup assistant in Google Analytics in the admin area. And you should be able to pull in, if you've connected it to a Universal Analytics account, you should still be able to pull in those audiences, but also still manually create them as well. Yeah, sorry, I can't show you right now because I'm not exactly sure where it lives, and I don't want to spend the time just like clicking around the platform, but yeah, it's definitely possible.
And then one final question, which I think is a really good one, actually. If you're a team that currently doesn't use Google Analytics, how would you start?
Nice
question, Dylan.
Yeah. I think first and foremost is like figuring out what you feel like the benefits of analytics is. I would say if you really like, if you're not, I mean, it would depend actually as well. Are you not using any analytics at the moment at all? Because definitely would say you should be. And I think it is a very accessible, it's free. So that's also definitely a benefit of it. And so I would say start by even just like creating an account and creating a property, and even just like adding the code to your page, and then just seeing how the data is coming in and seeing if it's useful to you. I think with the configuration especially, it's kind of important to try and get like a very kind of overall view on like how your users are using your sites. And so I would say, yeah, trying to get it on, setting up an account because it's free, because then you can just kind of play around with it. Because there's no harm in just setting it up and seeing how it looks and seeing if it actually works for you. And then creating, I would say, as with the recommendations that I mentioned earlier, like setting up conversion events and then setting up reporting, so that it makes it as easy to use the platform as possible, so that every time you're going in, you're not having to refigure out how to navigate it and where to look for different things. But yeah, I would say just kind of, I would recommend start using it. I think there's no real barrier to entry on it, which is quite nice. You just have to add the property to the page and it'll automatically start collecting information, and making sure that you have the correct cookies and privacy consent from your users as well.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously you need to, like Dylan said, there is no barrier to entry. Just set it up, have a play around. There's lots of like tutorials like for beginners online as well that you can access. So start there and have a think about what it is that you would like to know. What kind of insights would be useful to you, and yeah, and just have a play, and then get in touch with us if you need some support. Okay, I think these are all our questions. If I've missed anything, I apologize, but I think we got them